Am I using this or this? Cheers, matey. OK, can everyone hear me? Just checking. Good stuff. OK, so firstly, thanks for coming. Appreciate that everyone's here. Just as a quick introduction, so we were actually here about 18 months ago when this company was just starting. It was just me and a friend. We'd come out of university. We'd written thesis papers on this topic. And we'd just met by coincidence. We were introduced by a mutual friend, and we realized that maybe we were onto something. We were using real-time data to identify and quantify the risks involved with drone flights. I was studying at Cambridge. He was at Imperial College London at the Data Science Institute. And we basically quit our respective jobs and jumped into a drone startup, which retrospectively was a good decision, but at the time was just terrifying. And this was one of the first events that we spoke at. And the audience asked some really, really great questions, and the community kind of rallied around the project. So it's a huge honor to be back here speaking about what we've accomplished in the last 18 months. We're going to take you through what we mean by real-time data for real-time insurance. Do feel free to tweet if that's of interest, or obviously look us up. And we're very pro kind of Q&A, so just jump in with any questions if you have them during the talk or after the talk. Quick introduction. So I am fairly obviously this guy. I come from an academic background and started this company straight out of university. And Courtney's going to be up later. I'm going to be giving the introduction to the business side of what we're up to. And Courtney's going to be doing a deep dive into the data side and the analytics that we've been building over the last 18 months, 2 years. So we are looking specifically at the moment at the drone industry. And actually, we're focusing on the commercial drone industry. So very quick background on the commercial drone industry. It's not just people going out on kind of Boxing Day and flying drones for fun with their kids. It's industry, it's agriculture, it's insurance companies using these things for inspections and claims. It's photography, it's videography. It's a very, very rapidly growing industry. And the use cases for drones are basically exponentially growing. It seems like every day there's a new use case for drones. PwC predict that this will be a $127 billion industry by the year 2020, which is one of my favorite numbers to use when speaking with investors. But you can leave it up to yourselves to decide whether or not it's realistic. But what's important is that there are now millions of these things in production. DJI, one of the largest manufacturers based in China, is selling millions of these things a year. It's a multi-billion-dollar company. So it's a serious space. But it's a serious space with serious problems. And one of the problems that we identified right back when we were at university is the problem of risk and risk analysis. The truth is there are a bunch of risks involved in flying a drone, even for a professional and even for a very accomplished software. Right now, pilots are human beings. In a few years' time, pilots will probably be exclusively software, certainly in the commercial space. And what do we mean when we say there are a bunch of risks? Well, these are air hazards, so collisions with airliners, collisions with planes, potentially with people in them, obviously. Ground hazards, so collisions with sensitive sites on the ground. Nuclear power plants through to bus stations, through to schools, prisons, airports, and then obviously collisions with people themselves. And it's very, very difficult to quantify these risks. It's difficult enough to identify them, but to quantify them, it's basically never been done because there's so much data to ingest. And actually figuring out a way to put a number on these risks is something that a lot of companies are working on, but it's never really been achieved. So we set out to solve this problem. This is a very quick example of a drone flight going wrong, because often the question we get is, does this actually happen? Do drone flights go wrong? I've never heard of it. This is a drone distributing sweets in Japan, flying above a bunch of kids and their parents. So right from the start, probably not the best risk analysis done on this project. But I'm not sure if there's sound, but we will potentially hear and see what happens. OK, no sound. But, oh, there we go. So to put it in perspective, these things they can weigh up to 25 kilos per pop. And they can cause quite serious damage if something like that happens. So that incident actually ended up injuring 6 people. No one was killed, but it goes to show just what can happen when things do go wrong. And we've basically just pulled a few headlines. Literally, we just Googled drone incidents in the last few months, and you can see that it's just never ending. And it's every week there's a new incident making its way into the news. So just to run through a few of these, BA Jet hit by a drone at Heathrow. This is our favorite one, a small drone shot with Patriot missile. That Patriot missile costs $3 million, right? And this drone probably costs about 250 quid, and it weighs about half a kilo. So the amount of damage that drones can cause relative to their size and relative to how easy they are to obtain is astronomical. So what's the effect of this? I'm going to run through the effect of this on two stakeholders. Insurance companies. Insurance companies make money by accurately quantifying risk and then pricing that risk based on the quantification of risk that they've just done. There's very little data to go on in the drone industry. There are lots of unknown and unexpected risks occurring. Therefore, it's very difficult for insurers to intelligently price and therefore sell insurance. And the result of that on the other key set of stakeholders, which are the pilots themselves, is that they pay sky-high compulsory premiums. So operators, like I said, right now they're pilots. Soon they'll be softwares, sky-high premiums. To be honest, if you're buying commercial insurance for a year for a drone, you're probably paying more for the insurance than you are for the drone. And they're compulsory. So in the majority of the developed world, if you're a commercial pilot, you have to buy insurance. You cannot fly uninsured. And what we've done at Flock over the last year is, starting from a very pure risk analysis and data point of view, we've built a product that we believe actually helps to solve a lot of these problems for both of those stakeholders. And the point of today's talk is to roughly run through what those solutions are and how they work. And this is the basic formula that we use. It's not the most complex formula on earth, but I'll show you what I mean when I say data in, risk out. Very simply, the first step is, and effectively, we are a data company that's become an insurtech company, and the first step of what we do is actually collect data. So this is data about the operator, the drone, your hyperlocal environment, and weather details. Courtney's going to go into much more detail about how we do this. The second step is to analyze the flight plan, so to understand where and when you're flying. And the third step is to quantify risk. So using the algorithms that we've built, actually output a meaningful metric that represents the risk of your flight. We're the first company in the world to actually put a number on drone flight risk and make that transparently available to the user. So enough chat. I'll just show you what this thing actually looks like. We partnered with a quite large insurance company called Allianz, which is the largest aviation insurer in the world, to launch our first product. And we launched this product in January. Very early January. We now have, actually, funnily enough, when I left my flat this morning, we had 997 users on the platform. So I think we're probably going to hit 1,000 either just before we got on stage or whilst we're on stage, which is quite a fun thing to announce. And this is pay-as-you-fly insurance for drones. Let's just have a quick look at how it actually works. So the first step is we give the operator, the pilot, a map of their environment. We give them a flight area, which is a 500-meter radius. Hopefully that's easy to see. So we give you a 500-meter radius circle. You can fly anywhere inside it. Then we identify your real-time hazards. So these are buildings, they're schools, they're busy roads, populated areas, and so on. We allow you to choose your drone model. So as a pilot, you can simply build a garage of all the drones you own. You choose the one you happen to be flying at the time. We give you your risk factor, which is a score from 0 to 100, which is what I was talking about. And Courtney's going to dive into much more detail into what that is. And related to your risk factor is your risk-dependent price. And the way we come up with this price is by working very closely with Allianz and with our insurance companies to convert that risk factor into a price. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to move this map, or move around, and we're going to see how our kind of instant actuary actually updates and changes the price accordingly. So we're going to move from this relatively high-risk area where we've got a risk of 31 and a price of £17.39, and we're going to move to a low-risk area where there's less going on, less schools, less prisons, less roads, and so on. You'll see the price updates, as does the risk factor. And then when we move again to an even lower risk area where we're going to have one small road, we're going to see, once again, the risk factor updates, the price updates to suit. So what we've built is basically an instant actuary and underwriter built into a mobile phone application. So here you say, OK, I want to insure my flight. And then you can just customize your flight, right? So you can say, OK, I want to fly for not just 1 hour. I want to fly for 4 hours. And you'll see the price will update to suit. And then you can choose what liability you want, so how much you're covered for, basically. We offer up to 10. Let's say you want to go with 5 million liability because your customers asked you to make sure you're insured for 5 million. And then you're happy with that, to policy confirmation. And at this point, what we do is we basically bind your policy. We give you a geolocation stamp, a time stamp. We ask you to clarify that all of your details and information is correct. And we're super transparent. So we show you what's covered. That's the cost of your drone and the public liability. We show you that we cover your legal costs and expenses. We also very clearly tell you what's not covered. For example, breaking the law or flying illegal flights. We tell you that the claims process is just done through the app, and then we give you your key facts document if you want to download it. So that's just all of that information wrapped up into a nice PDF. So super, super simple. So when you're ready to go, you press confirm and pay, and then you get this little countdown that goes from 30 to 0. We've just stopped it here for the purpose of the presentation, but that allows you to then get ready, make sure you're all ready to fly, and go. Super, super simple. The aim of this was basically to make buying insurance for a flying robot as easy and simple as ordering an Uber. That's our internal metric for success. So I'll take you through a couple of features that we launched. We take a super agile approach when we build and launch our products. We try and get kind of minimum viable product out the door so that people can use it. And one of the first things we built into the product was a chat icon. So our customers using the app can actually hit this chat icon and speak directly with the team. And their messages go to every single person in our team, so everyone can see what our customers actually want. And then we just build that feature and launch it. So one of the first features that we were asked, hey guys, can you build this, was real-time flight risk assessments. I'll show you what this looks like. People were basically confused. They were saying, guys, we really like it, but we don't know why this flight is high risk and why this flight is low risk. Can you show us? So now you can actually click this risk factor, and we give you a real-time breakdown of what's going on in your environment. So we show you your wind speed, probability of rainfall, what kind of airspace you're in, whether there's high or low building density near your flight, and so on. The next thing they asked for is the ability to actually project that into the future. And this is where things got really interesting. We didn't necessarily expect this to be the case, but it turns out most people buying insurance in a real-time way actually want to buy insurance preemptively for a flight that they're doing 3 hours or 3 days in advance. So what we launched is predictive risk analytics. Here's how it works. You just click the Now button in the same way that you can on the Uber app, and then you can schedule your insurance up to 10 days in advance. So you can say, I want to fly on the 18th. You choose the time of day that you want to fly. And then we simply show you your updated risk for that time and your updated price for that time. And then you can schedule your insurance. And then, again, you can click your risk factor, and you can see all of the updated risks as Flock expects them to be at the time that you fly. And what we realized was that now actually 60% of our flights that we sell are sold in advance because people really want to just sit at home, buy their insurance, and then rock up at the site and fly, not have to worry about it. So there was a huge learning for us there, and it was powered by the data that we ingest that Courtney's going to talk about. So one thing we do take quite seriously is not just using data for using data's sake. We actually genuinely want to drive benefits to customers, otherwise there's not much point in doing what we do. So I've highlighted 3 super basic benefits here. The first one is price competitive. So our competition is charging significantly more than we are for the same product, effectively, because they have to do it over an annual basis, and they have no understanding of granular risk. We have a very good understanding of granular risk for all of our customers, so we can understand how risky every single one of those customers is, and then give a really competitive price for the customers that it makes sense for us to price this insurance for. The second is customized policies. Traditionally, if you're buying annual insurance, you buy it for the year, and if you need to change it for any reason, it's a phone call, it's a bunch of emails, and it's a bunch of expense. Whereas what we've done is we've basically made insurance and customizing insurance similar to Tinder, where you can just kind of swipe until you get the insurance policy that you need, and then you just select it on the spot. So it's actually instant, rather than having to be on the phone or sending a bunch of emails. You just have it right there in the app. And the third and final one is risk intelligence, and we actually decided to give this away for free. So you can download the app for free and just use the risk intelligence part without even having to buy the insurance. So that's me done for now. I'll come back later on, but I'll hand over to Courtney, who's going to show you what's going on under the hood and how this stuff actually works.
Great. Hello, everyone. Great, OK, this is working. Hi, I'm Courtney. I'm a data scientist at Flock. I come from an engineering background at Oxford University, specializing in the design of optimization algorithms. And I have been at Flock for 1.5 years, and I work on the research and development of Flock's risk analytics platform. Great. So what is real-time insurance? Well, traditionally, insurers will make yearly predictions. So if you're buying car insurance, you'll be buying a year's worth of car insurance. And insurers will need to predict what the cost will be for them for insuring you over the course of that year. And to do this, they rely on historical claims data. So they will take the last maybe 10 years of claims And they will use that to predict what their claims will be in the year that you're being insured for. So the problem in the drone industry is it's so new that this historical data doesn't exist. And for us, we make hourly predictions about what claims will occur. So there's a huge shift here between making a year-long prediction and an hour. So even if we had this historical data, it wouldn't necessarily inform us about how to make predictions for a claim over the course of an hour. So how are we doing this? Well, we're taking in information that a insurer could traditionally take in, like operator profile, so how much experience the operator has flying drones, and their claims history, the drone details, so how fast the drone goes, how heavy it is, and many other specifications, but also real-time environmental data. So what buildings, roads are nearby, airspace data, real-time estimations of population and traffic conditions. And we're also taking in hyperlocal weather conditions. So is it raining, is it windy, when and where you were flying. And we take all this data and we analyze your flight plan. So we perform some calculations to understand where your drone is likely to be during your flight. And we do this comparing it to the environmental data to understand how it relates to the buildings and roads that we have data for. We then take that and quantify the risk of your flight, and that is displayed in the risk factor that you saw in the demo. So I'm just going to go through each of these stages in a bit more depth. So how are we collecting the data? Well, first of all, it's being input by the pilot. So they're downloading our app, and the pilot here being the user. So any of you, if you want to go and download our app and buy some drone insurance, and you would just pull up a form that appears in our app, and you would type in, my claims history, or how much experience, how many hours I've flown drone for. Then there's also interacting with the map. So as you saw in the demo, you're moving the map around, you're choosing when you want to fly, and that's telling us the details about what policy you want. And that's quite important, obviously, for how we're going to quantify the risk of your policy. And then we have real-time data feeds. And essentially, we're doing this through APIs. So we're specifying the type of data that we want from large data providers like Google or IBM. And this might form something like a latitude or longitude. So we'll send a request for maybe like buildings with a latitude and a longitude, so a place that we want it for, and also an area that we want it for. And the API will then send back the relevant data for that area, and we will use that in our calculations. And finally, we have a proprietary database, and that contains the drone specifications that we collect and other useful things. And in terms of the drone specifications, basically every time that a new drone comes on the market, we will go onto the manufacturer's website and we will scrape all of the relevant specifications and put it in our own database so that when you choose your drone before your flight, we pull up all the specifications and use them in our calculations. So stage 2, analyzing the flight plan. So you saw this example before, and I got the laser pointer. There we go. So you can see roads that were highlighted in red, individual buildings here, and train stations. So the risks are highlighted for you, and you also see the edge of your flight area, which is the yellow circle. So what we do behind this is we create a probability distribution of where your drone is likely to be during your flight. And that's represented by the surface. And the center of the surface, up here, where the height is highest, represents where your drone is most likely to be during your flight. That's the center of your insured area. And as you move away from the center of the insured area, the probability of your drone being in this area decreases. And as soon as you hit this ridge here, which is, that is what the edge of the geofence is, so, or the edge of the insured area. So as you go over the edge of the insured area, the probability of your drone being there decreases massively. And the logic there is that it's much more unlikely for your drone to be outside of the insured area the further you get away. We use this to understand what is the likelihood of you being near to the buildings and the roads that we have data for. So the next stage, quantifying risk. What we need to understand is the probability of a claim. So what is the likelihood of an event which could result in damage or a loss or any type of event in which a payout would have to be made by an insurance company to another party which had the loss. So that could be anything from, I don't know, a drone crashing into a building, a drone crashing into a person, resulting in some sort of damage. Then we need to multiply this by the severity of the claim. So this is, if the event has happened, there will be a monetary loss or damage associated with this. And this also needs to be quantified. And that eventually gives us the expected cost to the insurer. So essentially, we're trying to work out the likelihood of the event and then the cost of the event if it does occur, and that gives us the expected cost. This is only for one type of claim. And in order to calculate the total cost for 1 hour of insurance, we need to work out, we need to sum together all of the expected costs from all claims that could occur within the 1 hour. And so we have to aggregate together all the possible claims, and that gives us the total expected cost to the insurer, which I will explain. So probability of a claim. How are we getting to a value for this? Well, we need to understand how we can take the data that we're pulling in and use that to predict the probability of an event which could result in a claim. And we have one such event here, which is an accident. And this axis here represents the risk of an accident. An accident here means a failure of a drone which could result in a collision, and that could then move on to a claim occurring. Essentially, we have a series of stages, and one of these stages is represented by this. And if the stage is true, then we could end up with a claim at the end of it. And this axis is proportional gust speed. So gust speed is a metric of the peak of the wind speed. And that's significant to the performance of drones and aircraft. And it's proportional to the maximum wind resistance of the drone. So the 1 here represents the maximum wind resistance of the drone. And as you go past the maximum wind resistance, the risk starts to spike. So you end up in a situation where it's very likely for your drone to crash. We also have temperature on this axis. And essentially, drones work very well between usually the ranges of like -5 and 35 degrees. But if you move outside of these ranges, then you end up with battery problems and failures. So the risk starts to spike here as well. And what this essentially is encoding is the effect of the temperature variables we're pulling in, but also the effect of the drone specifications on the probability of an event which could lead to a claim. And this is an example of a model that we use in order to quantify the probability of claims. So next, the severity of a claim. So we've had the situation where something's gone wrong, a drone's maybe hit a person, that event has occurred. How much is that going to cost? Like, how much damage has that caused? So in this event, any number of monetary values could be paid out. So if you did hit a person, an insurance company would have to end up paying out value. There would be a court case maybe. And any number of values could be paid out in this situation. So we have to build a continuous loss distribution that represents all the values that could be paid out and the respective probabilities of each of the values. And that is shown here. And there's a scale between 0 and a few million pounds. The mean is shown with this blue line, and it's £750,000. So normally, if you had built this distribution, your expected loss or severity would just be the mean. And you could use that in your calculations to work out the expected claim or expected cost. However, we have to consider the excess and the liability limit of the policy. And this is very specific to insurance. And what the excess is what the insurer will deduct from every single payout. So to give you an example, if you made a claim to an insurance company for £1,000 and your excess was £250, the insurer would deduct £250 from the payout, and so they would give you £750. And if you made a different claim and it was for £2 million and your liability limit was £1 million, the insurer would only pay out £1 million. And both excesses and liability limits can apply in one policy. So in this example, we have a liability limit of £1 million and an excess of £100,000, which is ridiculously high and is purely for illustrating. But it's so you can just see them both in this graph. And 100,000 here, 1 million here. And if we work out the expected loss, taking these parameters into account, we end up with a new mean of 600,000-ish pounds, and that's represented by that back line. So we now have taken the severity, we've taken the probability, and we use that to get an expected cost. That was only for one claim. And we need to aggregate all the types of claims that we could expect for all the different buildings that we could expect them for in order to work out the total cost. And that is shown here. So there's claims that you might recognize, things like fraud, road accidents, plane collisions, person collisions, I was mentioning earlier. And you can see the respective contributions to the total from each of them. But what you can also see is the contribution of building types like school, university, bus station. So we're splitting by buildings and splitting by claims. So you can see the individual contributions from each of these things, and we're summing them all of them together in order to get to the total. And yeah, so that is an overview of how we get to that final. And this loss is then converted into the final risk number that you see in the app. So just a point about the fact that Flock's algorithms get smarter over time. And that's because we have a three-dimensional claims platform. Essentially, when you've gone through our system and you've got your risk metric, you've got your premium price for the flight, you've bought your policy, and you're in the air and something does go wrong, you will need to pick a claim and you will submit your customer claims report. And this is what an insurance company traditionally will have. It will be the account of the event through the eyes of the customer. What we then have is environmental data that augments this. And that is the data that we collect about the environment that you're flying in before we sell you the policy. And we will also collect flight logs. And that is data that your drone records while it is flying. It's GPS data that tells you where the drone is at every point during your flight, and even data that tells you where the pilot's thumbs were while it was piloting. So it gives us a significant amount of insight into the entire picture of what was happening during the accident, which is really, really beneficial for us trying to analyze whether fraud happened and also for improving our overall algorithms when we try to optimize distributions like the ones I showed earlier. OK, so what's next? Ed is going to come back on, and he's going to give you an overview of the future of Flock.
Good job, Courtney. OK, so where are we at now? The technology that we've built actually lends itself really, really nicely to forming interesting digital partnerships that we've been learning about as a result of building the technology and actually having loads of inbound interest. Oh, and all of our partnerships are dead. Here we go. So to give you some idea, because the platform is fully digital, which sounds like an incredibly obvious statement in a room like this, but is a mind-blowing statement when you're speaking to insurance companies, which are basically operating 150 years in the past, or many of them, we can now form partnerships that are unheard of in the traditional insurance space. I'll run you through what a few of these are. So we're now partnered with half of the UK's flight schools. If you want to become a professional drone pilot, you have to go through a flight school. If you go through a flight school and there's an option to buy insurance for £1,000 or insurance for a £5, it's a relatively easy decision to make. So we're simply working with the flight schools to make sure that they can offer our insurance to their customers. Hardware distributors, out-the-box insurance. You buy a drone for the first time, you open it up, and you can buy insurance for a few pounds a pop. Because it's fully digital, you can do really nice things like QR codes or entering reference codes, and then you can actually start to compensate the partner, the distributor, every time someone purchases insurance through the app. Things get really interesting, though, here. And I'll just talk quickly to what we mean by this, because this is what we think working in this space and working with many, many other startups and insurers in this space is basically the future of the industry. It's fully integrated digital insurance that is no longer a chore. It's no longer something that you think about once a year and it's a complete pain and you spend hours and hours on the phone and your interaction with the insurance company is painful and then the only other time you interact with them is when something goes wrong and you make a claim. Rather, it's just a seamless, integrated system that works fluidly with whatever you happen to be piloting in this case. So what we mean when we say integrating with flight softwares and partnering with drone companies, when you fly a drone, you generally buy the drone, you have the software in your phone, you download the app that allows you to pilot that drone. We're now working with basically every drone manufacturer to actually embed our analytics and our software and our distribution mechanism inside their tools and their services so that you never have to think about insurance again, really. You just swipe to insure and swipe to turn off your insurance, for example, in the system that you prefer to use. So we're actually integrating with existing workflows. We've built basically a comprehensive insurance technology stack from beginning to end. We started just with the risk analysis part. We realized there was massive interest in the insurance industry and what we were doing. Then we turned into an insurtech company. Then we realized that to be an insurtech company, you need loads more than just a risk analysis and a few little pieces on top. So to give a quick summary of the full stack that we've actually built and what we're now starting to build out and make much more robust, we've obviously got the user interface, which is it's important in the sense that it was what the user actually experiences and sees. So from a design perspective, it's very important. But it's actually we're agnostic as to which kind of interface we use. We've launched an app which works on mobile and tablets, but these kind of technologies could work just as well on the web. It's just the method by which the user interacts with it. But really what's going on is what actually happens behind that interface. So there's obviously the data collection platform that allows us to aggregate all of the data sets that we work with, whether it's roads data, hyperlocal weather data, population density data, and so on. We've got the modular risk engine. So these are basically the algorithms. It's completely, the reason I say modular is because we can plug some of them out and plug other ones in, and we can adapt them quite easily. Then we've got the document generation and binding, which we obviously had to build to serve the insurance space. This puts together customized PDFs, it geostamps, timestamps your policies, and so on, and distributes them, saves them in the app, sends them to your email or whatever else. The 3D claims platform is actually turning out to be one of the most important pieces of technology that we built. Again, it was one of those technologies that we just realized, hey, the insurance industry really needs this. We'll go ahead and build it. We did a few epics, and at the end of the day, it's ended up being really, really useful, and we can now accurately identify fraud with a much higher degree of accuracy, we believe, than our competitors. And then there's the reporting and the analytics. Because this is fully digital, we can send out very quickly emails to all of our insurers, all of our partners, letting them know exactly how much has been sold and why and when and by who and so on, were we to want to make that data public or available to those partners. And you'll notice here in this entire stack that the word drone doesn't actually appear once. And I think this is the kind of key takeaway that I want to get across today, is that everything we've been doing so far is in the drone space. It's fully customized to drone pilots, to insurance companies who are interested in drones. But the technology stack that we've built doesn't necessarily have to be targeted to drone users, and that's why we called this talk a flying robot case study. We believe it is more of a case study rather than an absolute fundamental of everything we do. The truth is that our platform and many of the applications of our platform have use cases in many, many industries or verticals. And there's been an enormous amount of interest in what we do from insurance companies, from brokers, and others, basically saying, guys, we like what you're doing in the drone space. We'd be interested in exploring how it might be applicable in our space. Which brings me on to my final slide, which is really the vision at Flock, which is really what gets us up in the morning, and why we're quite excited about what we're doing. Obviously, the drone part is fascinating, and we love it, but the wider applications of what we're doing, we believe, are quite astronomical. What we mean when we say this, the world is just becoming increasingly autonomous, and we're seeing it happen at a very, very rapid pace. And it won't be long until we see thousands of drones in our skies and delivery robots on our streets and in our homes, and autonomous vehicles will be prolific. And these technologies have huge benefits, and a whole range of benefits, which we're excited about. And obviously, they come with their own sets of risks. And just as the drone industry has brought about whole new risks that are difficult to identify and difficult to quantify, so too will these industries as well. And we're starting to see them. Obviously, everyone in here knows about what's happened with Uber recently, with the crash in Arizona. So we're well aware that these industries propose enormous benefits and also enormous risks that are difficult to identify and difficult to quantify. Now, what we've done at Flock in kind of 18 months is demonstrate that it's possible to use real-time data to identify and quantify and insure risks in the drone industry. And what we're now very excited to do over the next 18 months and beyond is to actually demonstrate that our capabilities extend beyond the drone industry and that we can start to work with insurers globally and build a phenomenal team to help us do it, to actually pioneer big data-driven insurance in an autonomous future. So that's the wider vision at Flock. I will leave that there as well. Hopefully, you can see that at the back. We are quite rapidly growing our team, and we're hiring for a whole range of positions from engineers, data scientists, all the way through to kind of HR, office managers, and so on. We're a small but very rapidly growing team. So I'm doing a shameless plug here and leaving that there. We're really excited about building an inclusive, diverse team in a very interesting space. So definitely come and chat to me and Courtney afterwards if you're interested. Grab a card. And that's it, really. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. That was amazing. OK, we've got a little bit of time for questions. So, OK, hand straight up at the back. Actually, no, I'll go down here first. I will get to you, I promise. Hello.
Hi. I was wondering if you are using the data of the users to, for example, predict if they are flying quite often in the area where the insurance ends.
If they're flying outside of their flight
So, yes,
time.
basically, if you have a user and he's flying like quite often at the end of the circle, if you then reuse the data of their flight to predict how they will fly the next time.
Mm-hmm. Good question. So the question was, just in case anyone didn't hear, basically, do we have access and do we use information about where the pilot is actually flying their drone at any time during the hour? So the answer to that question, unfortunately, is right now, not yet. All we've done right now is launch the very first version of the product that we're actually pulling that information from your mobile phone. So we understand where you are at the start of the flight. We're not yet pulling the information from the drone itself and doing a retrospective analysis on every single flight you've done. But it's exactly where we want to be. There's tech involved in building it, and we're really excited to do it. What we take is the minimum viable product approach of just get it in people's hands, have people use the system and love it and suggest things. But yeah, if you know how to build that and you're interested in building it with us, come chat to us.
Blatant plug. I like it.
There's a couple of things. One on that, you might, instead of just doing it after the event, you might want to do it during the event, so you can then monitor the insurance as it goes on, to be able, presumably, to adjust it or warn them. But the other question, if you looked, so the various sideways ones you're looking, boating must seem quite a good industry, because again, you have expensive things that for most of the time people don't know anything about and only go out occasionally, just when they feel like it, and tied in with the weather, etc.
So I'm not sure I got the question.
Two questions. One is alongside looking at after the event drone data, is whether you'll be looking at it during the flight to give you more information to adjust things during the flight. The likelihood of claims, etc. The other one is in the various alternative ways you're looking for things. Have you considered sort of boats, which have the weather short-term usage most of the time? They just sit in a shed.
OK, so just on the first point, I think it's a similar point. It's that we would love the data during the flight. What we don't want to do is actually retrospectively price the insurance. This is something that we did look at initially. We spoke to a bunch of pilots about it. There was a lot of pushback from pilots who basically said, look, guys, this is a new method of buying insurance. It's confusing enough anyway, this whole real-time thing. What I don't want is the risk of having flown the flight and then getting slapped with a bill which is way higher than I expected. So from a trust perspective, it actually made sense for us to price and sell the insurance right from the beginning. But you are right that the data collected during the flight is very, very useful for analysis afterwards. The boat one, so we don't talk publicly about what we're working on and our kind of special projects elements, but there is a lot of interest in that from insurers and brokers globally, yeah. Sorry, there's a question coming from here. Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Are these insurance company who are normal insurance company, or are they special insurance company?
Are these insurers special insurers or normal insurers?
Yeah, the company. Are they normal insurance company?
Yeah, any type of insurance company is interested in understanding these kinds of risks. Some insurers are less innovative and are less interested in the future, and that's fine. We don't force insurance companies to work with us or to experiment with us. But some are very interested in these kind of experimental risks and future industries.
I'm also very interested to know how do you do it globally, because places like Malaysia, for example, where I normally visit every year, actually, first of all, the insurance company are very backward. Second things, I've never seen anything like this being done. So I'd like to explore with you, how would you, because I might even help you do that.
I would love to chat to you about it. Yeah, we haven't launched anything there on that side of the world, but we're always keen to learn about new markets. So yeah, absolutely.
Quick question. As long as you don't have enough historical incident data, how do you calibrate the risk models?
Go for it.
So there are, like, using historical claims data, as I was trying to get across in terms of like yearly historical claims data, only gives you a picture of like trying to insure for a year. So the events that we're trying to predict are much more short term. So we're trying to predict like what's the probability of you're flying a drone for an hour, and you suddenly go off course and crash into a building. But in particular, what's the probability you crash into this individual building, this one school that we have data for? We know where it is. We know where you started. So we build models that are kind of more bottom up and related to a more like physical-based approach to what events must happen in order for that event to occur. And then in terms of calibrating them, we can use different data sets to calibrate those. So from an insurance-specific front, calibrating things like an injury of a person, we worked with insurance advisors, actuarial advisors, in order to calibrate those distributions. So we use different fronts different sources in order to calibrate different parts of the system. But there was like no one industry that had all of the knowledge that we required.
Did you deliberately avoid taking the specific pilot into your calculations? You seem to be covering the craft, irrespective of who's flying.
We do ask for the operator's experience and their claims history, and that gets included in the pricing.
It's actually, there was a very related question about the history. When you're flying a drone and with different heights and everything, the weather becomes very different at different heights, and you could have microgusts and stuff like that that comes into play. How do you account for that, or is that something that you just average out or over an area or a region? I mean, I'm sure you don't have collectors of weather all over the place right now, right? I mean, you'll have millions of points.
So our hyperlocal weather data is based on like a area basis, not based on height. So we don't have access in terms of how it changes over height. So we do have to average it over, well, not average it, use the data that the weather station has given us about ground level. I mean, there are limits to how high you can fly a drone from the CAA. So I think it is fairly accurate the way that we're doing it.
Yeah. So just to clarify, you actually can't legally fly a drone above 400 feet. So you are right. It's never going to be 100% accurate, but it's the next best guess that we have is using the weather station data that we get from the Weather Channel. So they have hundreds of thousands of stations globally.
This might be a fairly basic insurtech kind of question, but as Allianz underwriters and you're pricing the risk, are they verifying your model, or are they just how are they trusting you that the price is correct?
Yeah, no, that's not a basic question. That is an incredibly difficult question to answer, and also a very difficult problem to solve, especially for a young company. So Allianz are world-renowned for taking this kind of thing incredibly seriously. Their claims department is renowned globally. They do not take risks that they don't understand. So we actually went through a process of partnership with Allianz, and that's a commercial partnership. And we talk very, very openly about this. We talk on stage with Allianz about this, actually. It was a 7-month and 22-day process from first meeting to partnership, and 1,050 emails and 26 meetings. But who's counting? And the reason it took that long is because, as you said, this is very important to them. They're the ones who are going to be paying out significant amounts of money were something to go wrong. So we actually, in parallel to that partnership process, was a very extensive due diligence process. And that involves us going into their offices, which are a Boris bike away from ours, and them coming to our offices, which is probably a black cab ride away from theirs. And we would have many, many meetings where we'd work through the algorithms, we'd work through case studies, we put together hundreds of examples of different flights and what the effect of those flights might be in different circumstances, in different weather conditions, at different times of day, and so on. And we worked iteratively on it with them, which is the approach we always take when working with partners, is to generally try and work together to come to a solution. At the end of the day, their economic interests and ours were quite well aligned, so it was in both of our interests to actually make sure that happened. But the due diligence process was lengthy, yeah.
Hi, sorry, I'm just curious, actually, have you had any claims? And if you haven't, how do you sort of, where do you get the failure information of, if, what can actually happen to the drone, and where does that data come from, if not from sort of your clients?
So we have had claims, a small number of claims, because obviously we've only got 1,000 people on the platform at this point, so it's never going to be a large number of claims, otherwise we'd have serious issues. But we don't talk publicly about what those claims were or how they occurred or what we do with that data.
Any more? Okay.
Can you share anything about a much bigger pie, which, I mean, this approach can be very useful for, and you kind of touched on being just a use case, the car insurance market.
Sorry, I didn't hear the first sentence.
So, can you share whether you have any plans for the car insurance market?
The short answer is no. I cannot share information about our plans in the car insurance market. The longer answer is there are a number of companies that are popping up that are starting to work on this. Companies who we love and respect and learn from, and vice versa, hopefully, who are starting to offer short-term car insurance, so an hour, a day, a month, a year. And some are doing it by miles, so by how the company's actually called by miles, and they do it based on how far you drive, and you put a little dongle in your car to measure that kind of stuff. What I will say is that I think the technology that we've built and the method of analytics that we've pioneered to some extent lends itself very, very well to autonomous cars, because autonomous cars represent a whole new area of risk that insurance companies, in my humble opinion, are not yet prepared for. And the analytics that we do and the real-time analytics that we do and how that feeds in and ultimately connects with the technology itself once we have this integrated service, that's where things get really interesting for Flock, I think.
Okay, any more? We've got time for one more.
Yeah. Can I ask, are you involved in a drone that is being used for surveillance, where it's basically used to check that, let's say, buildings are okay or crop are okay and that kind of thing? Do you get involved with those things?
So we're use agnostic. The only use case of drones that we do not touch with a barge pole is military. So if you want to use drones for agriculture, inspections, claims, whatever else, 100%, you can just jump on the platform, use the platform for whatever you want. We'll insure it, but not military.
Okay, let's give it up for Ed and Courtney. It was amazing, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Really good. Cheers. Good, mate.
Thank you.